Hey y'all, hey, Alicia here. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I make content based off of my life and as being a part-time indie author. So right now we are going to get into some books that if you enjoyed these movies, these TV shows, then I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy these books. These books I've read recently, and I was in a little bit of a reading slump, and these books definitely got me out of that. So I'm excited to share these with you. So I have this video split up into two different sections. I'm going to go into a brief kind of synopsis of each book and why I think it correlates to the movie or the TV show. And then at the end, I will give you my full thoughts on each book. I will tell you how I rated them, and I will tell you what I wish was there or what I wish they took away. So be sure to stay to the end of this video so that you can get my full thoughts on each book. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first book we have is Do Not Open by Kirsten Modglin. So with this author, if you've watched my judging a book by its cover video, and I will link it in the cards above, but if you've seen that video, you know that I don't read the synopsis. I judge a book by its cover. And so with this book, I really enjoyed the cover. It was mysterious, and I'm a thriller girl by nature. And I've read a book by her before called A Quiet Retreat. And if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my notes. But I read A Quiet Retreat by her, and I really enjoyed that. I was very immersed in it. I remember, you know, the emotions and the feelings that I was in while reading this book. And so when I saw this one, I said, I definitely want to read it. And this book reminds me of the movie Misery or the TV show You. And so with Misery, we know that there's a woman that's obsessed with this, I believe it was an author, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And she ties him up to the bed and just does all these crazy things, right? Stalker type of deal. And then with You, the TV show, we know that it's a guy that just met this woman and just immediately became obsessed with her. But so the way that this book, Do Not Open, correlates with Misery and You is that we have someone who is obsessed with our main character named Mari. And the twists and turns in this book is really what got me going. Mari is an author, and she's having a writing slump. And funny enough, I'm also having a writing slump, and I plan on doing a video about that soon. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss a video when I post it. But Mari, she is in a writing slump, and she just randomly gets this email from a guy that she's a huge fan of, saying that him and his wife wants to meet her. They are a fan of hers, and she's kind of, you know, leery about it, but ends up going. And then that's when all the twists and turns come. I will tell you all more about it and what I rated this book towards the end of this video, because this book really had me on my seat, on the edge of my seat. I definitely wanted to get through this book, and I did not. There was so many twists and turns in this book that it just really was beautifully done. And if you know and remember Misery, I know it came out a long time ago, but for You, the TV show, if you're familiar with that and if you enjoyed that, you definitely will enjoy Do Not Open by Kirsten Modglin. Our next book is Blood Slaves, and this book was hyped up for a while, and I'm not one to normally read books that's the most hyped, but for some reason I was just drawn to this cover. I was drawn to what I've heard about the storyline, and so I definitely had to pick it up. If you do not know what this book is about, it's about these slaves who become vampires. So of course, the most recent movie of vampires is Sinners, and this book definitely would remind you of that, because Sinners was kind of based around slavery time. I know some of them were free, but in this book, it's the year is 1710, and there's a lot of things that this book had that I wish Sinners had, but I'll go into that again later on in this video. But this book follows the slave named Willie and his, I guess we'll say baby mama, because they're not technically married, but she's pregnant, and you know, he's trying to find obviously a better way for them now that she is pregnant. And he comes across this African vampire tribe guy who is named Rafazi, and he's from Ghana, and that's where a lot of things just kind of go haywire. Really good. There's some triggering moments if you are triggered by slavery times and how they really treated slaves back in the day. He goes into like grave details about the torture and things that the slaves had to endure. There is in this book, so trigger warnings with that. But overall, if you can get through that, overall, it was a good book. And yeah, Sinners will be comparable. I say loosely comparable to this book because, like I said, there's a lot of things in the book that Sinners just, they missed the mark on that one. And then our last book is The Babysitter by Tanisha Stewart. And she is an indie author. She writes a lot of thriller books. And this book, I actually received an ARC from her. And funny enough, one of the characters in the book is named after me, so that was cute to see my name pop up in the book as I was reading. But yes, this is The Babysitter, and movie or show that I would compare this to is The Act or Stolen by My Mother. So those deal with basically a child being stolen from the hospital, raised into a new family, and raised to believe that this new family is their family. And then you go through the real parents or the real mom usually trying to find their baby. And so this one deals with that as well. So trigger warnings if that's something that is triggering for you. But in this book, the main character, Caroline, she's a nurse, and she is going through, or her and her husband Richard, they're about to have like a baby moon, and it's basically a celebration before the baby comes. So she's pregnant right now, and they hire a babysitter for a week so that they can go, you know, out of town to enjoy time before their new baby comes. And so they have a babysitter for their current child. And this book just goes into the life of the babysitter, the life of Caroline and Richard, and all the different twists and turns that come with that. And this was really like another book where it was hard for me to put down. It was very like had you on the edge, and it was just an overall good book. So now I want to talk about each book in what I rated the book. So spoiler alert, there's going to be spoilers. So if you don't want to see spoilers, this is your time right now to go ahead and click off the video and then come back when you do read the book. But if you are willing to just go along with it and maybe you still decide that you want to read it again, well, this is for you. So for Do Not Open by Kirsten Modglin, like I said, this book deals with an author who is having troubles writing. She lost her mojo for writing, and she receives this email. So what's crazy enough is that Owen Doyle, like I said, is the person that sends the email. He's supposed to be this very like popular, famous guy, and it catches her off guard because she's a huge fan of his. And she's like, why is he writing me? And then, you know, he's saying that his wife is a huge fan of hers and they want to meet. And so you go into like the mindset of her of saying, well, this might be fake, you know, this might just be a crazed fan, but she's going to give it an opportunity and meet this person. And so she meets the person, and the interaction was lovely. And then all of a sudden, like, he wants to see her again. And so she does, and she goes to his house. And going to his house, because they met like at a coffee shop or something like that the initial time. And so going to his house was where everything turned. So if you've seen Misery, then you know, like, obviously that Doyle is not who he say he is, and he ends up leaving her in this basement, and she barely has like a bed. I think it's like a cot or something like that, and she's just in this basement with a small window. Kind of gives you vibes of Frida McFadden, the housemaid. Kind of gives you those type of vibes of how they are, you know, locked up and stuff like that. But what gets me with this is because she just experienced, so the way that the book goes is like she experienced two losses, the loss of her husband and the loss of her son. And so that's kind of why she was in this writing slump, because her joy, her muse is gone, and she doesn't know how to grieve it. And so she's just been kind of like, you know, not writing as she usually does. And her writing is more of a like thriller horror type of books, because Doyle would use some lines from her book to pertain to what he would do to her while she's locked up. So there's like some lines where her character would tie up a girl and perform these certain acts. And so he would literally like recite each line for line. And so she's kind of like knowing what's going to happen next. And so she's getting scared off of that. And he's like so crazed by her. Like he wants to kiss her. He wants to be more intimate with her. And then his sister comes. And of course, you know, he locks the door. And she's able to, and Mari, the main character, is able to hear kind of like their conversations. And so like the sister's like, why aren't you answering your phone? Why, you know, what are you doing? I heard you talking. And so like throughout all of this, she kind of has like certain times where she's able to escape. And I feel like she was able to escape 11 times, but she always would just hesitate and wait last minute, and then when she does, he's already coming back, so she has to now go back to, you know, her room, or she just wouldn't leave, or she'll leave and then she'll remember something and go back to get something else. So it was just, that was irritating for me, because it's just like you had ample amount of time to get, you know, to escape, but you chose not to. And so there was one incident where she was trying to like poison him, and she was saying how like if she put, because he would send her food, at first of course she was denying it, but then he would send her food, and she would finally get to the point where she would eat, and then he would ask, can they eat together? And so she was thinking about poisoning him by putting a lot of toothpaste into him, like into his food or whatever, like trying to sneak it with to him. And so I had to look that up, like, is a lot of toothpaste toxic? But apparently it is toxic, and it'll give you like intestinal blockage and stomach pain if you eat too much. But so the son, let me see, so I'm trying to get to it. So like, come to find out, okay, so Doyle, his name is actually Chris. So she overhears his sister talking to him, and she uses the name Chris. So now she knows that his name is Chris. And so she tries to level with him and tries to say, well, can you take these chains off of me? And, you know, he's like, well, no, you're not ready yet because you don't trust me yet. And so it was like, for him, what he wanted to do was, the reason why he was locking her up was because he was trying to give her motivation to continue writing. He was a huge fan of hers, and because she stopped, it kind of set him haywire. And so he's trying to give her this space of, okay, go ahead, the creative force or creative space to go ahead and write and finish out this series, because that's what he wants. And so she's like, you know, no. And so you hear the conversation between them of her losing her mojo of writing, and you know, he's trying to like remind her or put her back in that space. And so that's why he was reenacting some of the stuff in her book, because he was hoping that she would eventually go back and start writing again. So he would bring her like a pen and a pad so that she can start writing, like literally writing her novel, which was crazy, right? So then we learned that her son got right, and this is where, let me see, this is where it starts. So during me reading this, it's like once she started like 11 times trying to escape and she doesn't escape, or she'll take her time, I was just getting frustrated, right? And so it was starting to become a 4-star read for me. But then it got to the point of what really happened to her son and her husband, and this is what made it 5 stars for me. So her son, because he actually was involved in a school shooting. So the son came to the school and like literally was shot up the school. And then of course, you know, the son died by the police, right? And so come to find out, spoiler, is that the dad, right, her husband, was the police officer that killed the son. Yes. So her husband was a police officer at this school, and the school was this where the son was attending, and the son decided to shoot up the school. And then of course, you know, trying to defuse the situation, which they really didn't go into detail, but the way that it was saying was that it was kind of like a standoff, and the husband had no choice, but because the son wasn't going to put the gun down or anything like that, and so the husband had to take the shot. And then what we find out is that Owen, or Chris, was the one that helped the son get the gun in the first place. Yes. So it was like, not only was he a fan, he was really trying to bring her, he really was the instrument on why her son is dead. And so she was mourning. So in the beginning, when she's mourning the loss of her husband and the loss of her son, she's really mourning the fact that because the husband killed the son, she couldn't forgive the husband. So they're separating, they're divorced, stuff like that. And so she's mourning that loss of the marriage, and then of course obviously her son. And the only reason why we learned about the dad or the husband coming back is because there was one point where she was able to reach out to her friend and send like a SOS. And so the friend went to the husband. I had to like read that again. I'm like, wait a minute, the husband. And so then that's how we knew. And so because he's a police officer as well, and obviously, you know, it goes into like his grief and feelings towards obviously his son. But when it goes into the friend reaching out to him, he goes and for somehow they were able to lock her location, and so he goes to rescue her. That's what it was. So what it was that because Mari was trying to escape all the time, she ended up going out in the yard, but then there was fence that she didn't know about, so she ended up getting captured, and Chris decided to try to like road trip her across the county. And so what Mari did was, when she was in the trunk, she kicked out the headlights, and so or the backlights, right? She kicked out the lights, and so he got stopped, and she was able to kind of send like her location to her friend. And so that was the whole ordeal with that. But yeah, so I gave it a 5-star because it was really good. Like I said, it was a lot of twists and turns to know who Chris is, how it correlates to her grief, and then to find out that the husband is still alive, and then what happened with the husband and the son. It was just like, I did not see that coming. And you don't find that out until like maybe the last 3 or 4 chapters of the book. And so like I said, I was already in my mind giving it a 4-star, but then when that came about, I said, oh no, I gotta give that a 5-star. So I really enjoyed Do Not Open. So the next book is Blood Slaves, and by Marcus Redmond. And that was a journey. So like I mentioned, it gets graphic. It gets graphic to how they basically was abusing these slaves, whipping these slaves to the raw meat. They even had the dogs eating the slaves. There was Willie and one of his friends had escaped, and so the slave owners had sent the dogs on them and was eating one of them, and then the slave owners tried to make Willie feel like it was his fault that that happened to his friend. It was just a lot, and in the course of that, you meet Rafazi, who is a vampire, and he's the last of his kind, and he's weak for some reason, which I couldn't understand why he was weak, or he started out weak. But he's weak for some reason, and then he is like feeding off of Willie because he's weak, so he needs obviously blood, and so Willie is like giving him some of his blood, and so he'll be kind of like, it was weird because he would get the blood that he needed, but then he's weak again. And I remember there was one incident where there was occurring where the slave master was actually Willie's baby mama, a girl, right in front of Willie, and Rafazi, and there was like another slave there too, and Rafazi kind of like comes, and the way that he comes is like in a flash, and so he would come get the one girl and then like come back, and so like I was so confused with that, because it's like, if you're a vampire, I understand you trying to like take the slaves to safety, but why aren't you attacking these slave owners? Like, I was just so confused with that. And then it took a while for Rafazi to be like, okay, I'm trying to build this kind of like army, not necessarily army, but give you guys tools to fight back these slave owners. And what was ticking me off was because there's this, I think her name is Gertrude or Gertie, which is the baby mama. She didn't want to be turned as a slave, and she had just got, and she obviously sees what environment she's in, and I'm just like, why wouldn't you want the tools to be able to fight back, right? And so, and she kind of convinced others to not turn as well. And so I was just like, what is going on? But it makes you think of like those times where with what's her face, Harriet Tubman. With Harriet Tubman, there was some slaves that didn't want to leave, you know, and it's just the mindset, or how people can be so conditioned that they know it's wrong and they can't further see themselves in anything else. And so it's just like, you can't take everybody with you. There was also talk about how the white Christians gave slaves the Bible. And so me being a Christian myself, I've obviously heard this from non-believers who try to justify why they don't believe in Jesus Christ. And so like and you know, not to get too deep, but in Deuteronomy 4:2, Revelation 22:18, and Revelation 22:19, it talks about how you should not omit parts of the Bible. And that's what the white Christians back in slavery time was doing. There was giving, it's literally called the slave Bible, and they literally took out passages from the Holy Bible and gave it to the slave Bible to further prove or show that they should stay as slaves. And so I hate when people try to compare the two, because you can't compare the two. It's not the same. Like, these white Christians or white people did not give us Jesus Christ, you know what I'm saying? Because they didn't give us the full thing. And if you read the Holy Bible, you realize that God brought people out of Egypt. They brought them out of slavery. And so as a Christian, I still believe in Jesus Christ, that he died for my sins and that he rose again. And so, but in this book, they kind of like talk about, you know, their faith in believing that, and versus the African religion that Rafazi has. And so the reason why I said it's based like Sinners is because obviously you see that with the slavery, and you see in Sinners, you see like the white guys, or the white, I don't know what you call it, the vampires, trying to bring, you know, the slaves, well, they weren't slaves, but the black people to their side because he wanted to build this one family and all this other stuff. So things that I wish that Sinners had that Blood Slaves did a good job in was basically like the details of, Rafazi, how he went into, actual what they were going through, like the slaves were going through. Even the vampires, when they did finally decide to become vampires, how they were in there just causing wreckage. Like they went to town on them slave owners, and that was like enjoyable to read. I'm not gonna hold you. It was just like the whole, he went into so much detail that I could picture what was actually happening. But yeah, so I, of course, gave this a 5-star. But what I wasn't sure about, because there was this overseer that they kept talking about. And I wasn't sure if this overseer was white or black. But this person was basically over the slaves. And like, he would give out direction. And he would just make sure that the slaves were doing what they were doing. There was also, which was sad, because I know I talked about the baby mama being. It even went into how there was a butler. And he was kind of like what we would describe as an Uncle Tom, and one of the slaves ended up walking in on him and the wife of the slave master messing around. And so basically she had him tied to the chair and she was just basically going at it, and that kind of made the slave feel a little remorse for that butler, because she was like, well, that's the reason why he's so upset, because he can't take his anger out on obviously this wife of the slave owner, so he takes it out on the slaves. And so I was just like, wow, like this book really kind of makes you think of, this is what people were going through, you know what I mean? And so it's, like I said, it's graphic, it goes into details. Obviously approach with caution if you need to, but overall it was a really good book. I would recommend it to anybody. So our last book is The Babysitter by Tanisha Stewart. So like I said, this book will remind you of The Act and Stolen by My Mother. So The Act centers around Gypsy. I forgot her last name, but basically it's where she is perceived to be sick, perceived to be like a cancer patient, and her mom is just basically doing everything for her. Gypsy's in a wheelchair, and her mom is just constantly taking her in and out of the hospital and saying how her condition is getting worse, getting worse, getting worse. And then Stolen by My Mother is based off a true story where this girl is taken from the hospital and later finds out that she or her parents is not who they say they are. And so for The Babysitter, this was very interesting because you follow Caroline and Richard, and like I said, they're having a baby moon, which is a celebration before their baby actually comes. And the mom, Caroline, is very leery of leaving the babysitter alone with their child. I believe the child is like 7 years old, and so they have cameras set up all throughout the house. And so Caroline, as they're taking this road trip to have this grand event, have this grand experience, she's watching the cameras, and then it cuts to the babysitter like tearing down one of the doors. And so then it cuts to the way Tanisha like breaks up the book is like in parts, kind of like how Frida McFadden does her parts. And so then the next part is about the babysitter, and come to find out, the babysitter was a teenage mom, and when she gave birth, the dad wasn't there because he had something to do, but he wasn't there. But the nurse was like, oh, she had made this comment about, might needing help, and not being able to take care of the baby. And then she just leaves and literally leaves with her baby. And so of course she had just gave birth, so she's kind of like drugged up, she's out of it a little bit, and she's unsure, and everybody is like, no, the baby is in the nursery or something like that, right? And she's like, no, I need to go see. And so when she finds that the baby's not there, then obviously they do like an Amber Alert. But of course the the nurse is gone with the baby, and she's thinking like, because her vision is hazy, and so she's like, I believe I remember how the person looked, all this other stuff, right? And so it's now like, I want to say 2 years or 5 years now that passed by, and everybody else has given up on trying to find her child, even the dad, right? But she's like, no, I know this woman took my baby. And so she does research, and she ends up finding this woman, and she tracks her down. And then it comes to find out that she sees this like she sees this advertisement for they needing a babysitter. So she's like, oh, this is a perfect time, because if I can get proof, then I can, I can tell everyone, show everyone that this is the person that took my baby. And of course she's trying to find her baby. And so she gets the job. So then the whole time, the 7-year-old is kind of like watching her and just kind of doing strange things. Like, she's with her, following her everywhere she goes. She, like, everywhere the babysitter goes, the babysitter's trying to get her to go outside and play, but she don't want to go outside and play. And then so all of a sudden she start hearing noises, right, that's coming like in the basement. And so, but the girl is acting like she don't hear anything. And then at night she's kind of like tiptoeing around. So it was just very weird, odd behavior. And so come to find out, she finally hears a noise, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna just see about it. And so that's when she starts breaking down the door, and she finds out that her child is actually the one in the basement. And then come to find out, the 7-year-old isn't even Caroline and Richard's babies as well. They took her. And the baby moon incident or baby moon event wasn't that she was pregnant and they're trying to have the last hurrah before she gives birth. It was actually them traveling to another town to steal another baby. And so it was just so many twists and turns. It was just so much going on that it was just like, whoa, you know what I mean? And then what was sad is because once all of this came to light, the children they grew up with them. And so there you see the attachment to Caroline and Richard. You see the attachment of the girls to each other, thinking that they're sisters, thinking that these are their parents. They're not understanding. Like I said, they're 7 and 5, I want to say, or 2. And so all they know is these two people, right? And so when they get reunited, even when the 7-year-old get reunited with her mom, it's like this strange interaction, because that's a stranger to her. Whereas the mom is just like, oh my gosh, finally found you. And so excited. And of course they want to hug and kiss that child, but the child is kind of like standoffish, not calling them mom, and it's all these other things. And so it's just really sad when you think about things like that, especially knowing that Stolen by My Mother is based off a true story. And I think she found out when she was like in her teens, like late teens, or I want to say in their 20s, like early 20s. And so you go through life having all these experiences, all these, memories of this family, and then to find out that this family stole you, you know what I mean? And then now you have to integrate yourself to these strangers who are actually your biological family. And so I could just imagine the mental toll and the psychological things that will come on the child, the biological family, like everybody involved. And in the story for Caroline, it talks about like she had mental issues. And I want to say even too with the act, of course, that woman, it's said that she had mental issues as well, the reason why she was treating her daughter like that. But with Stolen by My Mother, I'm not sure when it comes to the nurse that stole the child. I don't know if they said that was if that person had mental issues as well. But it's just sad. It's sad to, be raised by the family that kidnapped you, and you're attached to that person, even though now you know that everything was a lie, but you went through that, you know what I mean? And the thing about it is, it's not like they're stealing these children and mistreating them. Like, they're literally treating them as if it's their own daughter. You know what I mean? So they're giving the daughter everything that they want. They're giving, doing all these things with the daughter. And so, of course, the daughter is like, this is my mom, this is my dad, they're calling them mom, calling them dad. Then the other families, you know, like if it's grandma or whatever, like that's their family. That's all they know. And they don't look at it as they've been mistreated. They don't look at it as they've been abused, but they've been lied to for so long. And then to now go to their own family. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad to think about. And then so in this book, what the mothers did was, what the mothers, the biological mothers, they allowed the daughters to still see each other because they still called each other sisters. Like, that's my sister. So they allowed like playtime with each other. But it was a really, really good book. Really, really good book. It's a short, easy read. You can get through it quickly. I really enjoyed it. Gave 5 stars. So all these books I've given 5 stars. They were really good. Like I mentioned before, these books got me out of a reading slump. All 3 of these books, I was just on the edge of my seat trying to finish it, trying to see what comes next, being caught up in the twists and turns, and just really enjoying my reading. And I recommend these books to anybody. If you love Misery, if you love You, if you love Sinners, if you love The Act, if you love Stolen by My Mother, you will love these books as well. So that is all. I want to thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you read these books. Let me know if you're going to read these books. Just let's talk in the chat, in the comments. All right, later.